Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Welcome to our program today, which is Welcome to Donor World. And in the next 90 minutes or so, we're going to be looking at people. People stripped bare. It's as good as it gets. And the whole thing for me is to actually begin to say to you, we talk too much about donors, as if donors are some strange beings. But they're not. They're people. They're the faces you saw, the eyes you looked into. They are the people. And we've already begun with the answer. The answer is we can be as clever as we like. We can learn all the most amazing techniques and directions, but at the end of the day, it's about connection. How do you connect? And to connect, you need to inspire. These are two words which we're hearing all the time at the IFC. They're two key words that you're very familiar with. And yet, we continue to overcomplicate things. So why don't we go back to looking at those two words? We've created this show for you of Donor World to really try and say, how can we get inside the brain and the life of the donor? And I'm going to take you on a journey where some of you have been many, many, many times before, and I make no apology for making you do the journey again, because you can never do the journey too many times in understanding people, in understanding exactly what it is that makes them support you, give to you, listen to you, or even take notice of you. Even the most basic thing about taking notice of what you're saying and what you're doing. You've heard all the things about how busy the place is, the marketplace, and we know it's going to get busier and busier. So what I want you to do is I want you to suspend everything you know about donors, and I want us to go back to basics. And I want us to play around with basics. So what I've done is I've actually looked at this idea of saying, here are 5 basic things that I believe are critical to entering the world of the donor. 5 things that can help us in our work, no matter where you are, whether you're in direct marketing, whether you're in events, community, major donor fundraising. These are 5 key basics, ladies and gentlemen. So let's start with the first one, needs. We spend so long as fundraisers talking about our needs and our organization's needs, but we spend so little time talking about the needs of our donors. What are their needs? We need to look at that. We also then need to think about their emotions. Do you know what amazed me preparing for this program today? To actually go back and think about emotions, because I thought I knew about emotions. All the women in the room are going, you're a man, you couldn't possibly. But the big thing for me is actually I don't know about emotions. And just preparing for you today really stretched my brain to new dimensions. And beginning to say, whoa, there's so much more we're not even beginning to play with in fundraising. And when we understand that, we need to go back to one of my favorite topics, the life stage, the ever-changing people that we deal with. And they do change all the time. And yet we're bound down by technology. What will the database let us do? What won't it let us do? And that's how we steer our marketing. And then we need to think about that other critical thing, talking of databases, segmentation. How do we cluster people? How do we group people? You all know you want to get down to one-to-one relationships, but you also know that one-to-one relationships are so intensive. Technology is driving us to new heights, but my goodness, we've got so far to go. And then finally, I actually want to talk about giving. So you've got to get to the end before you get to the giving bit in this program, folks, because at the end, we're going to talk to donors, and we're going to find out what they think. And we've got a range of sort of videos, interviews for you to have a look at, and we're going to pull out some of the things they said. And by then, we'll have equipped you with all the things you might say, you might feel, you might want to do. So that's the journey we're going to go on. So does anybody want to stop now and do tax-efficient giving next door? No? Okay, in that case, we better get going. So, folks, we're going to start with needs. But it's the needs of the donor. Now, you all know where I'm going to go now, don't you? You know exactly what I'm going to show you, don't you? Because actually, the best bit of thinking of all time, and you'll be glad to hear I'm not going to drag you through every level, is this one. I didn't hear the audible gasp and moan from the audience going, oh, God, not another session with Maslow. Oh, what have I done? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've done the right thing, because you see, Maslow is actually the best framework we've ever been given. And because we've seen it so many times at this conference and many others, we just shut out from it. We go, yeah, I know all of that stuff. Yeah, I did my degree in psychology, or I've seen it, that sort of, different speakers have used it. But I actually went back and I looked at it fresh. I looked at it in a different way. And I thought, okay, we need to be more specific. Let's stop messing around with just saying, oh, this is a kind of way of looking at needs. And let's really get into it and say, what is useful up there? So bear with me, because I'm actually going to start with the bottom. Because you see, the physiological needs, which you know well, air, water, food, shelter, sex, all those things, you might think, well, actually, they're the things that actually they're not really about donor motivations. We don't meet those motivations. We deliver that in our programs. So the work that we do is around a lot of physiological needs for people. So how can that help us as fundraisers? And I was trying to work this harder. And I have to be honest, I struggled. And I was just about to just finish that slide and say, okay, I can't actually make this work. And then I came across a really interesting piece of research from 2002. It was from the United States. There's a clue in the title. And it was actually using an MRI scan. They discovered that actually when people were giving, there was a heightened stimulation in the brain. So in other words, we were meeting some stimulation needs in the brain. We were actually giving something. So the fact they were giving got a response. And it was a response in the same area as the brain as something else. Can I get the house lights for a second, please? So what do you think it's linked to? What do you think in the brain giving? Oh, that's a bit scary. What do you think giving is linked to in the brain? Has anybody got any ideas? Can I get a show of hands for anybody? Anybody? Pleasure. Why did I know you'd say that, Simon? That's a very good answer, but not quite what I'm looking for. But it was a good answer, but not worthy of a prize. No. Okay. Well, maybe, but I'll see how well I do. Come on, anybody else? We're in the right area, pleasure. I want to be quite specific because the MRI scan can now be this specific. I think this is really fascinating. So what is it linked to? Anybody? Come on, somebody give me a wild guess.
Satisfaction,
yes.
Maybe.
Satisfaction. You see, if I put pleasure and satisfaction together, I'm in the right area, but I want something really specific. It's something very... Sex, did you say? Or was that just an offer? Okay, sorry. She went, sex. My kind of session. Whoa. Hey, what room number did you say you were? No, sorry, okay. Now, the thing for me is actually we're not doing too badly here. We've got sex, pleasure...
Hunger.
Satisfaction. Hunger. You see, we're all getting in the right area. We're not quite there. Come on, I'm not going to work it much harder. I want one more guess. Reason. Okay. You see, you're all being far too smart and intellectual because, you see, nowadays, MRI scans can be so specific, they can link it to this. It's the same pleasure that's stimulated when you eat chocolate. So everybody in the room's going, yes, I like it. This is good. I want to do more giving. So now you've got a dilemma. Do you eat chocolate or do you give to charity? Discuss, but not now. So actually, you begin to look at the bottom of the pyramid and you can see the psychological and the physiological side and see how the physiological side can have some relevance, but tenuous, I admit. Okay, let's get the house lights down again. So let's move to the next one. The safety and security needs, okay? Safety and security needs, and begin to think about some of those. Because you see, I think this is quite interesting. How do we, in our fundraising and our relationships with people, help meet safety and security needs? Well, actually, I think these are two well overused words in our sector. Because you see, people, if they're truly to engage with you, need to feel safe and secure in your brand, your relationship. So they need to work on this trust and transparency. It's also about, it does what it says on the packet. You deliver. So, and again, this idea of if they want to feel safe in their relationship, their link with you, you've got to do these things. You've also got to have that reliable brand. You can go to some fantastic sessions at this conference about brand, and you have to realize that, that is something which is really important to people. This is why we're emphasizing it, because it drives the other things above it. And I think the other thing for me is it's about the basic hygiene factors. If you're not delivering, if you haven't got that openness with donors, then you've already messed up on that needs level. Let's move on to the next needs level, because when we get to social and belonging needs, I believe this is where fundraising really starts. So have you actually thought about this idea? So you've gone past the basic top at the bottom of the pyramid, we've done layer 1, layer 2, and now we're in the middle. This is where it gets interesting, because now in the middle, we're now talking about, nowadays we talk about social networking, online communities, all these sort of things. And that is all about belonging and the social needs and connection. We also talk so much about communities. And again, we're meeting those needs. We're meeting those connection points for people. And then, of course, you move on about the whole sort of point about belonging, and you move about connection. And remember what we said, one of our key words is that whole thing of connection. How we connect as well as how we inspire. So one of the big things for me in this is already, this is starting to give me a framework to think, wow, understanding the needs of donors, I've now got something that helps me understand them. Let's go up another layer and start to have a look at the esteem needs, which is basically, achievement and status. And you know that donors love this stuff. We talk so much about high net worth individuals, but actually what they're really looking for is that esteem need. So they need to feel good. They need recognition. They need to think about some of the things we talk about. And I've put a mixture on that line. They want donor stories. They want to know other donors, what other donors have done. We've put a lot of emphasis this year at the IFC on storytelling. We started with storytelling. There's going to be a session later today on storytelling. And we're actually really working on the stories of the work we do. But I believe that next year we should talk about the stories of our donors more, the extraordinary stories of what our donors do, and touch on those a little bit more. They came up yesterday, but think about this. And this is also about bringing people together into their own group of people, their peers, donor circles, donor clubs. And it's all about volunteer leadership and opportunities. So you can see we've now got 2 layers, ladies and gentlemen, in this model you've seen before, where suddenly you can begin to see how we can actually understand the needs of donors and connect better with them. Let's go up to the next one, because connection needs, connecting to people, builds on that one. And of course here you've got these different points here. Oh, hang on, what happened? Sorry, self-actualization needs. I've obviously put 2 of the same slide in. So you actually begin to see this idea of how people are pursuing knowledge, personal growth, how they're growing. Because you see, one of the things for me, and I'm going to touch on this later under emotions, is that I believe people want to grow through us and with us. People want to grow more. I think giving is about a part of growing. It's a part of humanity. But do we ever really think about it in that way? Do we think about those entrepreneurial donors and how we help them develop and grow by the fact we enable them to give? Do we think about how that self-motivation, what's driving those people? High net worth individuals, this is a classic area. You know, so many, I've been through hours of footage just to produce this today, and one of the things that's really clear to me is when you look at this idea of, you know, money and people having money, is they virtually all agree that they get to a point and it's meaningless. You know, it's that wonderful quote, who wants to be the richest woman in the graveyard? They just don't. What's the point? So it's quite interesting when you think about this. And of course, you know, the power of philanthropy. People at this level start to appreciate the power of that power of giving, not only in terms of the impact on the world and themselves, but the community and everything around them. And then finally, we get to peak experience, the very top. What is the ultimate experience that we can offer? What is the ultimate we can reach for? We can give people the most amazing feeling. Who needs a bar of chocolate when you can give money to charity? Don't answer that. But it is actually that whole thing of saying we really have to start believing in ourselves a bit more. We really have to start believing we do deliver amazing feelings. People really want to make a difference, we've heard before, but I like the amazing feeling idea. I like the idea of, something people can point to. Most of Europe and North America is made up of buildings with people's names on it. We don't really do that as much as we used to, but there's so much more people can point to. The web provides us a chance to link you to the smallest project in Africa. You can see your well. You can see the people. We can actually say people can point and get that peak experience. Key things they can work on. And all this thing about, that's the other side of the storytelling. So it seems like a strange place to start, but I actually am one of those great fans. Some of you have heard me speak before, and I always like to go back and say, why come up with something new and sexy when what we've already have is actually really powerful? We're just not working it hard enough. And that is why I think that Maslow framework is a great way of looking at needs. And I really push that back to you and say, think about it again, re-engage with it, and see whether it works for you at a different level. So now we move along, and we move along to emotions now. Now this is where I think you might have some surprises ahead of you. Because actually, I'll be honest, I really did. I'm very, very proud to say this is my 26th year as a fundraiser. And when I started in fundraising, I was taught the basics, like all of us. And I was taught there are 3 reasons why people give. This, the heart, this, the head, and then actually the other one was this. And you're wondering what this is. Well, actually, I wanted to get a picture that actually was about the spirit, the world that you want to see around you. In this crazy world where you should be frightened to read a newspaper, especially if you've got stocks and shares, in this crazy world that we live in, people want to actually feel they can make a difference, they can do something, not only for themselves, but their children, their children's children, all those things. So the spirit. So the heart, head, and spirit. So life was easy. All you had to do in fundraising was work on those 3 levels and you were in business. That was it. But actually, in this day and age, that's far too simplistic. So I started having a look around. And after a little bit of, going through all the different websites and all this stuff, this seemed to be the list that everybody said were the basic emotions. These are the basic emotions people work on. People will have an emotion or a cluster of emotions around joy, acceptance, fear, disgust, anger. And then when you work further, you realize that emotions have opposites. So if you've got joy, you've got sadness. If you've got acceptance, you've got disgust. So you're working on opposites. Now already I was beginning to think, when we create our stories, when we create our fundraising materials, how often do you think about not only the emotion that you're trying to touch or connect to, but actually the opposite emotion? What could be the opposite emotion? 2 people can look at the same photograph. Some people could see joy, and some people can see sadness. Have you ever thought about working the emotions much harder? Have you ever thought about really looking at that letter, looking at that brochure, analyzing that website, and saying to yourself, what am I doing? Not what am I communicating, what am I doing? Because actually communicating is not that difficult. But now I think the level that we all have to work on is actually, what are we creating? What's happening in somebody's head? What's happening in somebody's body? Because that's what we have to begin to manage. That's what we have to begin to think about. So I went further with this, and I thought, well, okay, I'm not sure I like this list of basic emotions because there's something missing for me. In fact, there's quite a lot missing for me. So I went further. And then I actually saw that if you look at all the different pieces of research around emotions, these are the ones they all cluster around. Number 1, you'll be glad to hear, is love. Now, actually, love is one of those things where you think, well, actually, yeah, we all understand love, don't we? No, we don't. Of course we don't. Anybody says they understand love, they should be locked up. The big thing for me is actually, when you look at this and you look at the breakdown, look at all the different things that cluster around it. Look at this incredible rich list of ingredients we have. This is like my cookbook for connecting with people. This is my book of ingredients. And instead of just saying, oh yeah, well, we've got some sort of elements of love and affection there, stop and say, what the hell are you talking about? What is it? What are the ingredients you're drawing out here? Have you ever thought about bringing lust into your marketing? It's an interesting thought. I might pursue that one myself. But you see, the big thing is you start to think about these things. Look at these things: infatuation, arousal, tenderness, compassion. Suddenly, where I just always thought about heart and love, now I've got this amazing range of things. If I went further and started to look at joy, and you break joy down, look at these. These are wonderful, aren't they? Zest, contentment, pride, cheerfulness. And I've put the main words in yellow and the other ones in white. But again, look at this range of things that you can draw down from. Why is it we go into fundraising offices and there's year planners on the wall or there's extension numbers on the wall? There's never lists of emotions. There's never pictures to remind us of what it is we're connecting with, what it is we're trying to touch and inspire. Move on, look at this one. Sorry, I just like that photo, just for my own amusement. It's that whole thing here of saying, look at this element of surprise. You ever use surprise in your marketing or when you're connecting with donors? Have you ever used surprise? And yet it's seen as one of the main emotional responses. And that's about that surprise, about what you do, how you do it. Surprise is fantastic. It's a very exciting range of things you can do there. And then you move to anger. This is actually, to my mind, the last 5 to 10 years, certainly in the UK, anger is one of those things that we're using more and more. People get angry about things, and we can be the channel to express that anger in a positive way. We shouldn't be frightened of a negative emotion. Some of those words up there are incredibly hard-hitting words. They're very hard-hitting words, and yet we mustn't be frightened of them. Because what our job is to do is to help people to get angry. Doesn't that sound strange? Have you ever thought about your job as a fundraiser is to help people get angry? You can help them feel good and help them feel loved, but get angry. Because nowadays, people want to get angry. Because it's an escape valve, it's a pressure valve. They want to feel that through you, they can channel it positively. They can do those things. Sadness is one we know very well. Wasn't it interesting at the awards last night when we saw the video, the NSPCC video, we saw the donkey video, and what were we playing on so much? Look at the eyes behind those words. You don't need to look at the words, do you? Just look at those eyes peeping out behind the words. Sadness. We work that sadness, but look at the different things. Have you ever broken down and thought about when you choose an image, when you choose a word, when you choose a style, a package, when you choose a way of presenting, have you thought about that sadness plane and what you're doing with it? Fear's an interesting one. It's very interesting because as somebody who used to be director of fundraising at a cancer charity, you realize that fear is actually an emotion you have to deal with. Because very often, people will give to you out of fear of what might happen to them. People will give to you out of fear because they want you to find that cure. They want you to make that progress before they're one of the statistics. And it's this idea of saying, look at this, look at these different areas. So actually, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at those different clusters I've given you, now think about this amazing range of things and be much more conscious of which ones you can use where. You use these subconsciously. There's nothing new up here. All of you know these things. And all I'm asking you to try and think about is if you want to be smarter in people world, being smarter in people world is about being smarter about knowing what you're trading in, knowing what you're using to inspire, knowing what you're using to connect with. Because you see, when it comes to connecting, we've so far looked at donors' needs and donors' emotions. So they're over there. And then we've got all of this stuff over here, the cause we deal with, the beneficiaries we seek to serve. And that's what we're trying to connect. So we're using those needs and those emotions. But you know what we do a lot of? I'm going to show you what we do a lot of, because this is going to depress the hell out of you. Because you see, there's this little word at the bottom there called values. And anyone who's been through brand exercises, you know you spend a lot of time saying, so what are your values as a charity? And you end up with something that looks a bit like this. So, what is the connection you offer? So we say, well, the values of a charity. Here we go. Number 1, openness. Number 2, honesty. Number 3, transparency. And number 4, integrity. Now, can I get some house lights for a second? I'm just going to ask for a moment of honesty. Is anybody in this room going to be honest enough to say that